Welcome to another edition of WIN TV, Washington Informer News, bringing you news that matters. I'm your host, Denise Rollard Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer. I always like to say this, if you're watching on Facebook, please go ahead and hit share so that your friends can see our weekly broadcast. And if you're watching on Twitter, be sure to follow us. And if you're a TikTok user, thank you, Desiree, follow us there too. We're trying to grow our TikTok audience, all of our audiences. And certainly when you connect your friends and families and family members and colleagues, it certainly does help the show. And we want folks to see all of the important news and information that you all are providing as we do this broadcast. Be sure also to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that's at Washington Informer TV. It's all one word, Washington Informer TV. And that way you can see some of our past broadcasts and, of course, see this broadcast as we broadcast it. I hope you picked up a copy of this week's Washington Informer. I always like to show the paper to you. This is our issue for this week. And I think our reporters, as usual, did a lot. They were out there on the ground this week covering the Women's March and, of course, the recent Supreme Court decision. And we're doing a project in conjunction with some of the other papers, publications in the DMV, but particularly in the District of Columbia, on the struggles of homelessness. And we're doing this in conjunction with Street Sense. And you all may see the folks, a lot of the guys and women are homeless out there that sell their newspaper. But they came up with this project, and a lot of local publications, including the Washington Informer, agreed to participate and to share this 1 week, a story on homelessness and the impact that it has on our residents. And, you know, the mayor's been doing I probably would like to know your feedback on this, whether you think that the approach the District of Columbia is taking on getting rid of these encampments makes sense to you, and her policies as it relates to finding homes for so many of the district's homeless. For those who don't know, you know, the District of Columbia is a place where if you're homeless and you need services, you don't have to show an ID. Now that, I don't know if that's changed because of COVID. We might need to take a look at that. But, and so it's been a place that sort of welcomed people who are in need of services from outside of the district. They come into DC and they can get homeless or services for people who may be unhoused. And so the voters voted for that. We supported it. But now it's the mayor's taking some other actions. And so we just want to get your feedback on how you feel about that. And like I said, you can always reach out to us at news, N-E-W-S, at WashingtonInformer.com. Again, that's news at WashingtonInformer.com. You see that down below. And so that is a great place to give us your feedback about that issue and others that we may be raising throughout the show. We've got a great show today. I mean, it's packed with, I think, some stellar guests who are involved in some fantastic things that are coming up. For example, next week is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You all know it as SNCC. We all know it as SNCC. We'll commemorate its 60th anniversary. So I'm so excited to have Charlie Cobb, who actually helped to conceptualize the Freedom Schools for SNCC, who will be joining us with Dr. Joshua Myers, who is a professor at Howard University, where he's educating students about the Black student movement. Our business spotlight today is with Thereron Interiors, and I hope I said that right, but we are going to have Mimi Fall on to talk about that and to talk about how she takes dreams and turns them into reality. So we look forward to talking to her because it's the fall season and we've all been inside a lot. And so we may be looking at ways that we want to change our environment. I think Mimi's going to be here to share that information with us. And speaking of businesses, several local businesses received a grant from Comcast. Comcast has a program called Comcast Rise. And we're really, again, excited to have Reagan Yeldell. That name sound familiar? Yeldell? Well, yes, Reagan Yeldell of Comcast will be with us along with Melissa Bradley, co-founder of Eureka. And they're coming here really to extend an invitation to all of you all who own small businesses or own businesses in the DC area to apply for the grant this year. You know, I was so excited this week to go to Mahogany Bookstore on, I think it was Wednesday night. And you all know I'm a big fan of Mahogany, which is located here in Ward 8 as well now with their new store at National Harbor. And there were a group of journalists who have just published a new book called Say Their Names, How Black Lives Came to Matter in America. So we're going to have two of those journalists with us, Michael Cottman and Nick Charles, who are respected writers, journalists, communications executives, you name it, they've got the credentials, and they're going to come on to talk about the book today. And then Reggie Williams, author of the book Marginalized Voice, Devalued, Dismissed, Disfranchised, and Demonized. Who in the world could he be talking about when we talk about marginalized voices? Well, Reggie Williams is going to tell us who this book is, what this book is about, who it's for, and what he hopes to accomplish by writing this book. So we got a full house today and some great information. So having said that, we're going to move on now to hear our broadcast from reporter Curtis Knowles.
This is WIN TV News, bringing you the news that matters. Prince George's County schools are cracking down on unvaccinated employees. A mandate set by the county says that unvaccinated employees must submit a weekly negative COVID test. PGCPS spokesperson Megan Gibber-Selassie said a disciplinary action has begun against those employees, but couldn't say how many had been placed on leave so far. She also said that the school system has no desire to institute a vaccine mandate for workers. Of the school system's roughly 19,000 employees, 3,400 have yet to still be vaccinated. Prince George's County Attorney Eric Barron received confirmation late Thursday from the U.S. Senate to become Maryland's first Black U.S. Attorney for Maryland. President Joe Biden nominated Barron on July 26 for the position. He previously worked as a Maryland prosecutor in both the state's attorney's offices in Prince George's County and Baltimore City. His official start date has yet to be announced. The Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen, who released thousands of documents that shows that the company knew its platform was used to spread hate, violence, and misinformation, is expected to meet with the House Select Committee investigating the January 6 riots at the U.S. Capitol as soon as Thursday. Haugen testified before a U.S. Senate subcommittee on Tuesday, where the panel specifically asked for data and analysis on domestic violent extremists affiliated with the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Facebook's Vice President of Global Affairs, Nick Clegg, rebuffed the allegation, saying, "If the assertion is that January 6 can be explained because of social media, I just think that's ludicrous." Howard University has teamed up with the streaming service Netflix to establish a $5 million scholarship in honor of the late actor and Howard University alumnus Chadwick Boseman. The school announced that the 4-year scholarship, created with the support of Boseman's wife, will be awarded to students who exemplify exceptional skills in the arts, reminiscent of Mr. Boseman, and demonstrate financial need. Boseman, who passed last year at 43 of colon cancer, graduated from Howard in 2000 and served as the university's commencement speaker in 2018. Beginning in the current semester, the first 4 scholarships will go to students from each class, with one incoming freshman to be awarded annually thereafter, covering the full cost of tuition. This is Curtis Knowles with WIN TV News.
Thank you, Curtis. Great news that you shared with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And Curtis actually is a recent graduate of Bowie State. Is it Bowie or Morgan? Actually, Curtis went to Morgan State University, and so broadcast journalism major, and jumped in and decided he wanted to do some work with us here at The Informer. So we are really excited. I think he does a great job. Give Curtis Knowles a shout out, and just tell him great job. We're trying to bring in more of our younger journalists and graduating journalism students. That's why I keep mentioning Desiree Williams, who's here with us, who's helping to co-produce the show with Chevy Lassiter. And in a couple of weeks, we'll be celebrating Desiree's graduation from Howard University. Yay, Desiree. All right, next week is SNCC's 60th anniversary, the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee. And we have heard so much about SNCC over the years. A lot of times, it's sort of a romantic feel about SNCC, and it's nothing like having some of the members who were involved with the organization, who were founders of the organization who worked really hard in the movement to talk about what that movement was about then. And so we are so happy to have Charlie Cobb, who, as I said, conceptualized the Freedom Schools in the early days of SNCC. As well, he also was excited to hear that he accompanied Fannie Lou Hamer to the voting polls, and someone who I've known since I was a student at Howard University, and he was there as well. So, Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Josh as well, Josh Myers, who is a professor now, Dr. Josh Myers, a professor at Howard University School of African American Studies. Is that it, Dr. Myers?
Which we had a School of African American Studies, but we're in the College of Arts and Sciences in the Department of African American Studies. So.
Okay, we're gonna find some money. We have to make somebody out there. We got to get a school. And you're teaching the Black students about the student movements, right, at Howard?
Absolutely.
So first of all, thank you, Charlie. Let me start with you because if you could just put us in a place and time when you first came to SNCC, how old you were, if you don't mind sharing, and I mean, what got you involved in the movement?
The sit-in movement. It's almost all SNCC grew out of the sit-in movement, in fact, which erupted on February 1. 1960, with 4 students sitting in Greensboro, North Carolina. It quickly spread to roughly 80 southern cities within months. And also within months, in fact, Easter weekend of that year, SNCC was formed by student protesters. Skipping a lot of specifics, under the great influence of Ella Baker, SNCC fairly quickly evolved into an organization of organizers. And a handful of us began spreading across the Black Belt South to organize in Black communities. And the issue then was voting rights. And we dug into communities, often very violent towns and counties in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and the like, to begin trying to gain voting rights, because the consensus in Black communities there in the South was what we need, in fact, is Black power. And we have the numbers to get Black power through voting, but we're denied voting rights. And we had to fight for that. And that's really what drove SNCC in its first years. Myself, I worked in Mississippi. I got to Mississippi because I was a part of the protest coming off the Howard University campuses in Maryland and Virginia, and on the way to a workshop in Texas for student activists, stopped in Mississippi because I was traveling by bus. And the students there, I tease them now, essentially kidnapped me and said, why are you going to some workshop when you're standing right here in Mississippi?
Wow.
And I understood that as a challenge. And it was summertime. I didn't have to be in class. So I said, well, I'll hang out with these people for a while in the summer and see what they're doing, because I didn't know anything. I knew about protesting. I got off the bus in Mississippi because the students were sitting in, and as far as I was concerned, Mississippi was the worst piece of the universe for any Black person.
Wow.
And I thought it was one thing for me to be sitting in Maryland, quite another thing to be a student sitting in Mississippi, and I wanted to meet them. So I went up to the Delta with them, and that's where I met Mrs. Hamer. She was just emerging into the movement, and I accompanied her along with others to try and register to vote. Well, to make a long story short, this is in 1962.
All right.
I didn't get out of Mississippi until 1967. Because I realized at the end of the summer, I couldn't just say, after having involved people with me and voting rights struggle, well, it's been an interesting summer, folks, but I've got to register for classes. I'm just not made up that way. I couldn't break off. So I wound up staying.
Wow.
And staying. And there were other students just like me, right across the South. That's what made SNCC.
Right.
All of us And I'm sure parents today wouldn't appreciate it greatly, not going back to school.
Well, that's why I wanted to bring in Dr. Myers, because I mean, first of all, and I want anybody to object to the statement that I'm about to make, because I love that controversy. But you're teaching students today, and some of them have even gone so far as to say that was then as it relates to voting. I mean, I don't, trying to help them to understand what went into voting rights. Sometimes that history is disregarded. The story that Charlie Cobb just told is disregarded. But you're dealing with students now and trying to help them to understand the movement. To talk about, where you find students today. And I'm glad we're bridging this with the Black Lives Matter conversation later on. But so you've got two movements. You've got SNCC, you've got Black Lives Matter. How are you putting all that together for your students?
Well, it's part of a continuum, and a continuum is present today, but it also extends back to the past, right? Charlie always talks about the Southern Negro Youth Congress, for instance, and the work that they were doing in the 1930s and 1940s. And that's a formation that also began at HBCUs in many ways, right? So it's about getting them to see themselves in the larger picture, in the larger context. I don't play the whole generational wars thing because we're fighting a different kind of war, a bigger war. So it's all about getting them to see themselves in that longer context, in that larger genealogy of Black struggle. And fortunately, I extended back even before we have a student movement, because the student movement only captures a longer tradition of Black struggle, an even longer tradition of Black struggle. And so once they can see it in those particular terms, it helps us better understand the kind of conversations around voting rights, right? And so for me, I see flaws on both sides of how people use the notion of voting rights as a way to use as a kind of political culture, right? Because it was always about collective struggle and Black power, right? And so to the extent that we are framing voting rights in those terms today, students will understand it. But if we don't frame it in that way, it becomes about an individual act, right? It becomes about an individual kind of an individualist strategy. But it's always been a collective act and a collective strategy for Black people. So they've been able to see that.
I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and I wish I was sitting in your class. So if you just for our purposes, where do you start? If it's not in the 60s, not that I need you to teach the whole class right now, but yeah, at what point do you start the conversation in history? What point do you start?
Well, it all depends on the nature of the class that I'm teaching, right? So I teach a course, for instance, called 20th Century Black Social and Political Thought. And in the first 2 or 3 weeks of that class, we're not talking about the 20th century. We're talking about the fact that the 20th century is part of a continuum. Use that word again, right? And so they can better understand what happens in the 60s, or for instance, in the 40s or in the 20s, if they understand what happened in Reconstruction, right? And so there's always a point of entry that allows us to really understand the more familiar aspects of the history that they already come with, right? But for us, in terms of starting point in Africana studies, we start as far back as we can, right? And so wherever we find the presence of African people, that's where we're going to go. So it's everything for us.
Wow, yeah, it's interesting when you mention the name of the class. It takes me back to my days at Howard, Charlie, when I took a class called Black Thought from Donnell Lee
yeah.
Madhubuti, that Black Thought class. And so I'm sure it's a very interesting and thought-provoking program. But
Yeah.
Charlie, let's talk about next week, because 60 years, SNCC is celebrating, its anniversary. And you're not just saying, we're 60, it's been 60 years, but you've got an event planned. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, from the 14th through the 16th, we're having a virtual conference. Originally, our idea was to have, an actual physical conference where people could physically meet and interact. What it is, though, is an intergenerational conference where we've been aware for some time and interacting with, as SNCC veterans, many of today's young activists in the movement for Black lives. And this conference while on one hand commemorating SNCC's founding, also pushes the idea of intergenerational actions, because what young activists today are doing is very much connected with what SNCC did 60 years ago. And what SNCC did 60 years ago, really is part of this whole tradition that belongs to struggle in Black communities, what I call an organizing tradition, which is what's, if you think about it, enslaved Africans were not holding protest marches on auction blocks, and they weren't conducting sit-ins at plantation manor dining room tables. What were they doing? Well, they were organizing something: escapes, revolts, sabotage, work slowdowns, secret schools. The whole tradition of Black struggle is a tradition of organizing at the grassroots. And this conference wants to give a great deal of focus on this, particularly with regard to how we interact with today's young activists. We don't have to share with them much about protesting. We have a lot to share about organizing. And this conference is not a conference that aims to create a new organization. Mm-hmm. It's an effort by us that began really with these activists 10 years ago at SNCC's 50th. Begins a discussion about how do you organize in the 21st century.
Right.
It's certainly different than the 20th century in some respects. The specifics are different. There's one thing I tell them all the time: to be organizing in Sunflower County, Mississippi. It's another thing in some ways to be organizing or trying to organize on the west side of Chicago or South Central Los Angeles.
Exactly. And I'm wondering for both of you, because I mean, here we both are, Josh, you said very clearly that you don't want to have, you don't like getting into generational wars, which I think is critical. So how do you merge the conversations, between the generations still without, saying we did this and we did that? You know what I'm saying? How do you have that conversation, or how is that going to happen here at the conference? What's the mix of some of your speakers and topics that sort of merge the generations and the issues?
Yeah, so we purposely identified mixed panels. In fact, there was a long conversation. We have very long conversations about how to think about these generations and how to ensure that represent at least 3 generations on these panels as it started out. And then, of course, the events of the year 2020 happened, and that allowed us to sort of also embrace the urgent issues that younger activists are grappling with in the wake of that particular moment. And so you'll see on our agenda, there's a lot about the justice system. There's a lot about policing. There's a lot about those particular questions. And they're presented in ways that would not have been as systematic in the conversations that would have happened 60 years ago, right? So there's a way that we can establish common ground by injecting the particular issues that they are interested in our Facebook in their daily organizing practices. And that's how you create that particular common understanding.
Interesting. So how can folks register for this conference?
And so the website is SNCC60thanniversary.org, all one word, and you'll see everything listed there. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. SNCC60th is our handle, and also on Facebook, SNCC Legacy Project, and all the information will be available from there.
Good. Do we have the website correct for the anniversary, SNCCLegacyProject.org, or?
You can get to it from there too. That's the Legacy Project's website. But there's also a website for the conference itself.
Wonderful. And are there any speakers or anything that you want to highlight about next week? I've already registered. I just want to let you all know.
Good for you.
Yes, I
Denise.
did. Yes, that's an event you don't want to miss. So, any folks you want to highlight that are going to be participating next week?
Well, it's a range. I mean, I think we have everybody from Derek Johnson, the president of the NAACP, to leaders of the Dream Defenders, Rachel Gilmer, to members and participants in BYP 100. When I last counted, there were about 43
Wow.
young organizations of young people that have emerged and formed the movement for Black lives since the murder of Trayvon Martin a decade ago. So there will be representatives from almost all of those organizations on panels. Some are elected officials, some, as I say, head activist organizations. We didn't try and exclude anyone because we want an intergenerational exchange across a range of political opinion within the Black community. That's the goal of this. This may be the first kind of full blown type of effort like this ever. And I want to say very quickly that what we've learned in our own conversations as SNCC veterans with today's young activists, as long as you don't insult them, it's pretty easy to talk to them. And you, even when they differ
Right,
with
right.
you, as long as you don't insult them, and I can think of Black leaders who have.
And vice versa,
Well, we're probably more tolerant of being insulted than a lot of young
activists. Right.
activists.
I guess you're right. And so hopefully I haven't insulted you, either one of you during this interview.
No. In fact, you've honored us by allowing us to have this time on your program.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited. I think it's good that SNCC continues the legacy, and that, the other organizations have been sort of kept the organization, in its proper place, and continues to work with generationally. So thank you all so much for being with us today. Again, I hope that folks will go on and register for the conference. We're going to just put up the registration or the information to register before we go. And, I'll be seeing you all next week. Thank you so much.
Right,
thank you, Denise.
All righty.
Good seeing you, Denise.
Likewise, Charlie. Yeah, so I mean, we're talking about SNCC. We couldn't have done this any better. I don't know if Sherry meant to do this on purpose, but I think it does work, because now we're going to talk about a new book that is on in the bookstores right now. And I'm going to say bookstores because I promote bookstores, particularly Black bookstores. But I'm happy to have joining us Michael Cottman and Nick Charles, who are co-authors of a book called Say Their Names: How Black Lives Came to Matter in America. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us.
Hey, thank you, Denise, for having us on. We appreciate you. Thanks for all the work that you do.
So who was the brainchild behind this book? Who said, let's get together and do something now? Michael, was that you?
I'll have to take credit for that.
All right. Talk about why and why now.
Why now? Well, Say Their Names: How Black Lives Came to Matter in America. Black lives have mattered for decades and decades. Why now? Because after the murder of George Floyd, after the senseless deaths of African-American men and women, at the hands of police officers, racial profiling, the Black Lives Matter movement, we felt that the time was now to write a book, to start a larger discussion about social justice issues, about civil rights issues, about white supremacy, about systemic racism in this country. So I scribbled some notes, on the back of a napkin one night, and took it to my agent and talked about it and told her that this is really something important that I think we should do. She embraced it, much to her credit. But her major question to me, and my question to myself, was, or more of a statement: I can't do this alone, right? I mean, there's no way I can do this alone. So I reached out to 4 distinguished, outstanding, passionate, compassionate, thoughtful writers, and Nick Charles, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, one of my dear friends and an incredible journalist. Reached out to Nick. I reached out to Curtis Bunn, to Patrice Gaines, and to Keith Harrison. And I asked them, would you be willing to write about the impact of COVID-19 on the Black community? Would you be willing to write about systemic racism for Nick? And he came up with this, the role of the Black church, and something I had been thinking about. So you know, we're like minds. To write about the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, to write about Donald Trump and the policies that have negatively impacted African Americans, to write about women in politics, and women in leadership, the women in the church, as Nick will talk about, and the politics of race. And Denise, I'm just happy to tell you, I mean, they didn't miss a beat. They didn't miss a beat. I mean, the question was, when do we start? You know, of course, I said tomorrow. And, you know, we produced a book that we feel is unprecedented, unparalleled, and a model for the industry. Our publisher, Hachette Book Group, told us that she can't recall a time where 5 writers have come together to share their expertise about systemic racism and about civil rights, social justice, in one voice, writing in one voice, where each of the sections talk to each other, and during a pandemic. So we feel that this book's informative. We feel it's uplifting, thought-provoking. We feel that it offers fresh ideas, and we feel that this is a book that will stand the test of time.
Well, what I said in the introduction that I forgot to mention now is that you all are journalists. I mean, we know you all because of your bylines and the publications that you write for, the Washington Post. Many of you all are there, and other places. And so, you know, to have an opportunity to hear something that's, you know, outside of the byline, but your analysis of the stories that you've been covering, I think is really exciting and exceptional. Nick, I've read your piece on the Black church, which I said, whoa, he did not pull any punches on this one. But tell me, why did you pick the Black church? And if you could share without giving it all away, because we certainly do want people to read the book. But what was your perspective? How did you approach this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us on. And I'm going to be transparent. I've known Denise now for over a year as the managing director of Word in Black, of which the Washington Informer is one of our stalwart collaborators. You know, I don't mention it in the book, but my dad was in theology school before he went to become a mechanical engineer. And so I grew up in the Pentecostal church, fire and brimstone. And I've always had this issue about the challenge around faith, because so many of things that I learned, quote unquote, in church, but not so much from gospel, were things that I thought were at odds with what the gospel might have been or should be. And for a long time, I talk about this. I have good friends who are ministers. I have a lot of family who are very religious. And as my faith has evolved, been challenged, I always wanted an opportunity to explore the things that the church has done and the things I think the church has not done. And in this chapter, I basically talk to a lot of women who are the backbone of the church, as Black women are the backbone of most of everything else, who no one ever seeks them out to ask them their opinion or what they think. And, you know, one of the data points that people should know is that there are more Black women in seminaries than there are Black men. But once they get out of school, there aren't any pulpits for them. So basically, I went to these women and said, hey, what is going on? Knowing the history of the civil rights movement, knowing that we laud a lot of great men and some women, but not enough. And also how it dovetails with the Black Lives Matters movement, which is not particularly born out of the church, but even though it has connection to the civil rights, and the women who founded it are women of faith, even if some people don't think so, and how in this moment, particularly in the last couple of years with the murder and killing of George Floyd, with the global protests, how Black Lives Matter movement became the largest civil rights movement in the world, and how it was not dependent on being birthed by the church. We know how venerable the church is, how necessary the church is, but there are things about the church that have not evolved, that need to evolve for it to survive.
Well, I mean, and then also, I mean, I thought that was, you know, you even mentioned the fact that, you know, there's always been some controversy. I mean, how Dr. King led the was considered the leader of the civil rights movement, but the church seemed to be somewhat tepid around its support of that movement. And so I don't want to get too deeply into that conversation because I want folks to read the book. But also, Michael, I mean, how did you all decide what topics that you wanted to put in here?
Denise, it was fluid. I mean, we couldn't write a book without talking about COVID-19 and the disproportionate impact that this pandemic has had on the African American community. So Curtis Bunn was writing these stories all along for me anyway, for another venue. So it was, and Nick was writing tremendous stories about social justice and civil rights. So in some ways, it was a natural evolution that we were working together anyway to move it to a broader product and a larger product. So we were already working on these kinds of stories. So we were already working on Black Lives Matter, already working on COVID, not so much the Black church, but also working on politics and the African American community. So these issues are critical. And so that's another reason I wanted to write a little bit about the politics of race in this book, because politics touches every aspect of our life, jobs and healthcare, education, parenting, on local, state, and federal levels. So it's important that we are entrenched in the political process, right? And we have seats at the table, whether it's city council, right? Whether it's halls of Congress, doesn't matter. We need to be there because these political decisions impact the quality of life for our people from coast to coast. So these are ongoing issues. And just one piece I just want to say that I started my section because you're asking this question. I think it's fortuitous. I open it just by saying, who will stand up for us? Who will champion our causes? Who will have our backs? Who will have the courage to speak our names? And I think that sums it up, right there, the courage to speak our names. And in this book, since Nick is on this call, I just have to, he's modest. This is one of the freshest approaches to the role of the Black church that I have read in a very, very long time. And people need to know that. He has analyzed, watched the evolution. Obviously, Nick has his own take on it, which I think is tremendous, right. And we have a mentor who's passed away who used to say, tell the truth and duck. And that's what Nick has done in this chapter.
Hopefully, I don't know if the Pentecostal church can excommunicate you, but
I'm proud of him, and that's what I'll say about this book, Denise, because it's fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, new, novel, So, and I think people are really gonna, walk away from this saying that this will, as I said earlier, stand the test of time. Historic.
That was, we've got to wrap it up, but that was my question. What do you want people to take away from this? And it's very thoughtful and thought-provoking, but I was just curious about what you want, once people have read it, and we just saw one of our viewers who heard you all last night on Richard Prince's journalism's event. They can't wait to go get the book. That's Nicole Crawford. And so what do you want people to take away from this?
Well, think about it. This is it's a historic, an historical book, but it's not just history. Mm-hmm. What we talk about is happening now, and I think in many of our chapters we look forward. We have a whole thing on mass incarceration. People are questioning, do we need that? We have a great section by Keith Harrison on policing and the people who want to defund, the people who want to abolish, the people who just want to somehow reform. So all the things that we talk about are continuously happening. In your last segment, you talk about SNCC and the young people, and when they look back, what they think about it is that you have to understand the past to go forward. And our book is a book that is a template, and also it's a companion to history because it's going on every day. Nothing we talk about in there that COVID exposed and that African-American communities are subject to now is foreign to us. It may be foreign to some other folks. And if you look at the news every day and the information and the platforms, a lot of stories we see echo what we have talked about. So our book will always remain fresh because people will always say, hey, we're talking about prisons again. Well, Patrice Gaines laid it out for you. You're talking about politics and race again. Who's running? Michael Cottman laid it out for you. All these different things. This is not the first and last pandemic. And the response to it, Curtis Bunn has done that. So I think the important thing is when you read this book to understand that this is happening now, and then you have to figure out, how do I get involved? Mm-hmm. How do I become a change agent? How do I help transform my community?
I think it's that's fantastic. It's an excellent way to close. The other part that I have to say, I mean, it's just because of who I am and who you all are. You're journalists, and so you all, didn't analyze, from watching television like we did. A lot of times you were out there covering these stories. History. You've been out there a long time, and so you have a perspective that's sort of like the front seat or the front row, of the movement today and how it evolves. So. I thank you. I know you got a lot on your plates, but I thank you so much for writing the book. Can't wait to read the other chapters, the other sections. And I encourage everybody, go pick it up, and pick it up from Mahogany Books if you can. But, can I do this right? Okay, yeah, go pick it up and get a copy. And maybe we can talk about it at some point among ourselves. But gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you so much, Denise.
Don't think I didn't notice when you said, you all guys have been around a long time.
Well, present company included.
I'm just teasing you. Thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you. All right. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
All righty. So it's very, very, I'm telling you all, I'm serious. We've got a couple of books that are we're going to talk about. Now I'm trying to figure out how we can create more book conversations through WIN TV. And so hopefully we're going to come up with some ideas. We got some great authors. One that's sitting in the room with me right now, as I mentioned, Reggie Williams. I want to talk about her book at some point too. And then another author that's coming up a little bit later on. So, but anyway, we'll figure that out. Next, though, is, how do we, we need a place when we leave work where we can sit. I talked to somebody today who said they're going to read this over the weekend. They have a place, their reading room space. I want to ask Mimi Fall, owner of, and I want to make sure I say it right, the Thereron Interior Design Company. We're going to start off actually, Is there? First of all, welcome to the show. I don't want to.
Thank you.
But when we talk
so much.
Yeah, I mean, you create, what is it? You make dreams come true in the spaces where we live. How do you do that? And what's a good space to read a book?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Denise. It's a beautiful day here in Virginia, and the best way to create a reading nook or a comfortable spot to cozy up is to have a very comfortable chair or sofa and really just have elements in the room that make you happy. That's the best way to do it. Whether you're into color or you're love a neutral palette, it really is based on your own experience when it comes to interiors and what makes you happy.
That's fantastic. I mean, you are an interior designer. How did you get into this business?
Well, that's interesting. I started out, I'm a Tuskegee alum, went to the School of Architecture, graduated, did that for a number of years, and then worked as a project manager on construction projects. And probably about 15 years ago, I was working with an interior designer and decided that I could do that. So I just basically decided that I wanted to do it. And I took a class, also trained with an interior designer for a number of years, worked at furniture stores, and really sort of found my way. And now I do this full time.
That's excellent. And, some people, think they have their own design. They bring you into their houses. They say, okay, I want you to do this. And you look around the room and say, I think we need to do more work. But how do you determine, how do you figure out when you work with clients, what works for them? I mean, do you get to know their personalities? Do you get to know their favorite colors, their favorite room? How does that work?
Right. So the way that we work with clients is we ask them to complete a style questionnaire, which really hones in on the different types of colors and metals and woods that they like, and really sort of target them and get them to focus on what they want in a room, and just an overall approach to their style eye. So some people are very eclectic. We have people that are more traditional or transitional. And so that really washes out when you do your style questionnaire. It's an imperative part of our study and our due diligence that we perform with every client. And that really sort of gives us an idea. And then we sit with clients and really kind of get to know them and understand how they live. And Theron Interiors is the way we pronounce it. You're welcome. So with Theron Interiors, we really focus on the mood. What mood are we creating? Do we want it to be happy? Do we want it to be serene? What do we want? What are we trying to evoke? Elegant, inviting, enhancing, whatever it is, thought-provoking, whatever the mood is, that's what we really strive to create with every client.
And I know that in some cases, like I said, it depends on the client. And maybe you even have to stretch people a little bit, right?
We do.
Yeah. Talk about how you do that, because I'm even looking at, your great Black background there. I know you're showing different things, but, they're mixtures. I mean, how do you get stripes and circles and squares to match, to blend? For me, that would confuse me, but.
Well, it's not really a matter of matching. It's really making things that are cohesive and that speak to each other. Okay. So just like in relationships, oftentimes opposites attract. Sometimes it's the same way in design. So you may have a stripe, but a circle goes well with a stripe because it's the polar opposite of it. So it's really creating those type of moods and environments that you learn to sort of blend patterns over time. It doesn't happen necessarily right away. You may find an interior designer that you like, and you're like, oh my gosh, how do they do that? Well, it takes time. You've got to kind of study the styles over the course of years, what makes something mid-century modern, what makes something boho. And over time, you sort of learn how to blend things together. It's really blending, not necessarily matching.
I got it. Okay.
I'll show you some of the shop as well. So
yeah,
kind of get an idea.
And while you're at it, I understand that you work with the juju hats. Can you talk about that? Is that what it's called?
So the one thing about Theron Interiors that we are really happy to talk about and to share with our clients is that we get things globally. So things come from all over the world. It's not just American products or African products. There are also things from India here at Theron Interiors. And then we also came across a great resource for juju hats, which come from the country of Cameroon. The juju hat was, and I'll show you, I'm going to turn this around so you can see. The juju hat was actually worn by the people of Cameroon in tribal dances. And so I'll just kind of show you some different things we've got displayed here. So we've got quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Oh, those are beautiful. Yes.
So we've got lots of different things, all kinds of colors of juju hats. We really, Denise, blend a combination of found objects, vintage objects, retro objects, new objects, rugs, end tables. We really just like to blend things. I don't like it all to be the same. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of like, the old adage that something borrows, something blue. I think it's more of a balancing act when you have things that are come from different places and really speak to each other, but don't necessarily match. Things that are older, things that are new. That's really how you create the best balance and the best mood. So here's some more juju hats.
Wonderful. Where are you showing this? Where's your location?
So I'm calling it a shoppice. Okay. And that's really a shop office, and we're located at 2967 Chainbridge Road in Oakton, Virginia. We're in Virginia, right off of 66, not even a mile from the highway. So this shoppice is really just a labor of love. We've got all kinds of different things, and we enjoy what we do. We have good times here at Theron Interiors. So come see us. We're opening grand opening coming up October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd.
Fantastic. And give us that address again.
It's 2967 Chain Bridge Road, 3 words, in Oakton, Virginia, 22124.
That sounds like a girl's trip.
It's a fun place.
Yeah.
It's an adventure. It really
Right.
feels like an adventure. You're when you come into the shop, you'll be probably pretty surprised about everything we have in here because it does come from everywhere.
Now, I want to congratulate you on this, and they're telling me, Denise, time, but I always have that last question because, you know, we were
Sure.
into a thing before COVID about minimalism, right? And I think people maybe who are in minimalist or things where, you know, it's not a lot there, we're probably feeling like they're going crazy because there wasn't enough, you know, interaction with the things that they may have wanted in their lifetime. Are we beyond a minimalist sort of popular environment now into more warm and cozy and full?
Absolutely. Right now, the trend is, and I'm not necessarily a trend person because I've always been a maximalist. I sort of teeter in between the two, but maximalism is really popular right now.
Okay.
People are wanting to have more things in their room as opposed to less things. I think it just brings a level of comfort to have different things to look at, to take your attention away from the mundane. And for me, it makes me feel good.
Right.
It makes me feel balanced.
Okay, well that explains the what did you say, the opposites attract there, because I'm married to a maximalist and I'm a minimalist, so we just have our separate rooms and we do our thing. So, but this is beautiful. You mean me? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, we certainly do hope. How long have you been in business now, you said?
Well, full time, I just started this year, but I've been doing this off and on for over 8 years.
Wonderful.
And I started collecting a lot of things probably about a year or so ago. I would see fabric and love it and want it in a lampshade or a pillow. And I just, you know, as I had time, I would just start to collect things because my dream was to have a shop.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. Your dream came true and you make other dreams come true. So good luck. Maybe we'll see you. I would hope to, but I hope other folks will come on out. And we hope to have you back during the holidays too, because certainly people will be
Thank
decorating.
you so much.
Yeah. And
thank you so much.
Some advice on that. All right. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, I liked some of the things that I saw there, and I look forward to going out and seeing more. And speaking again of small businesses, I am so excited to have Reagan Yeldell, Executive Director and Program Management and Customer Experience at Comcast Business Services. We're going to show a brief video and we'll be back with Reagan as well as Melissa Bradley.
Businesses are largely in COVID. Small businesses have been almost twice as likely to shutter.
Disproportionately so.
More than half of Black business owners
struggling to obtain federal paycheck protection.
COVID-19 on African Americans. You know, somehow we always find a way to rise.
To the blueprint builders, to the backbones of every block, to the late night legends and the pioneers of legacy. For the curators of the culture, for the family franchise, and for generations to follow. You might fall, but never fail. Keep rising, keep rising, keep rising. Apply today for a variety of business, marketing, and tech makeovers on us to help your rise.
Welcome. Okay, that was fantastic. I'm glad Chevy found that, and Reagan looking great. Melissa, thank you so much. You are too. Thank you for being with us. Melissa, now you are the co-founder of Eureka, and we're going to talk a little bit about your business. But Reagan, tell us, what is Comcast Rise?
Thank you, Denise. Well, first I want to say, happy Friday, everyone. It's a beautiful day in Philadelphia, which is where I'm dialing in from. Hope it is wherever everyone else is. And thank you so very much for having me on Win TV. It is such an honor. But Comcast Rise was born out of the circumstances that we saw ourselves in about a year and a half ago. So rewind the clock, right? You had COVID, you had the social unrest with the George Floyd murder, and then you had the continuing economic injustice that that plagues our communities, right? And so with the confluence of those events, Comcast felt that like DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been a part of what we do, but we wanted to double down and do more specifically for the small business community. And there's all types of data that showed that, how small businesses really bore a lot of the brunt of COVID, but small businesses owned by Black and brown people, significantly bore that brunt. They're twice as likely to go out of business. They're more than likely to not have gotten the PPP funding. And so basically we put together this program, Comcast Rise, as a way to help businesses owned by people of color, not only to help them rebuild post-COVID, but also give them the support to prosper post-COVID. And so we put together a program that can provide, technology support, because as COVID has all shown us, the importance of being online. I mean, look how we're talking right now, right?
Exactly, right.
Of having your digitalness up to snuff, the importance of getting the word out for your business. So marketing support. A lot of our, small businesses, think about, our hair salon, our barbershop. The local community knows them, the folks around the block, but what about the next neighborhood, right? So how do we put together marketing support to help those businesses get the word out? And then also in the cities that the data has shown that have been significantly impacted by COVID and kind of economic disparities, also providing funding to help those businesses. So we're very, very proud to able to bring that to not just, a nation, cities across the nation, but specifically for DC. DC is one of the cities that we're coming with the grant funding.
Well, full disclosure, Washington Informer is also a Comcast customer. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, without the relationship we were able to build, we wouldn't have this broadcast coming through as clearly as it does, because we had some trials in the beginning, but thank goodness that's been worked out. Melissa Bradley, you are co-founder of Eureka. Tell us what Eureka is and how you discovered or actually benefited from Comcast Rise.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan. I'm based here in Washington, D.C. And ready for the weekend. So Eureka is a business tech platform designed to help entrepreneurs scale. And it was actually built at the onset to support entrepreneurs of color and women. We recognize that the next wave of entrepreneurs, the fastest growing segments, have been historically overlooked and underserved. And we wanted to be able to scale the work of many amazing universities, accelerators, and incubators to make sure these entrepreneurs succeed. We are honored and humbled to be able to partner with Comcast to be able to implement the program, but more importantly, provide coaching. If you're familiar with the UPS study many years ago, it said there's a likelihood of a 1.5 times success rate when entrepreneurs actually receive coaching support. And so we're thrilled to partner with Comcast here in DC and across the country to provide grants as well as coaching support to the entrepreneurs to make sure that they use the money wisely and that their businesses continue to grow.
This is excellent. So you actually provide a service to that supplements what Comcast is doing. I mean, you apply for the grant, and then you sort of help to fulfill a certain aspect of that grant. Is that correct?
That is correct. So they go through the grant application process. And I think Comcast really understood that having money is really just the beginning, not the end, right? Most entrepreneurs struggle with how to use it. And let's be honest, some entrepreneurs get less money they really need. So Comcast is responsible for making sure these entrepreneurs get the grant, but to make sure they use it well and they actually achieve the outcomes they desire. We are thrilled to be able to partner and work with the entrepreneurs one-on-one, as well as a cohort, to make sure they get the supports, along with a lot of other community partners that Comcast has brought together to specifically focus on BIPOC entrepreneurs.
Oh, that is fantastic. And Reagan, now the application process, some people just don't do stuff because they just think you ask too many questions, you got to put too many documents together, you got to give your, present your birth certificate for your great-grandchild that hasn't even been born. I mean, is it that difficult, or tell us about the application process?
It is not. So for the Comcast Rise core program for the marketing and technology, it's basically, again, tell us a little bit about your business and tell us your story. right? How, what has happened to you in the past year? What do you hope to achieve? How are you in the community? So it's more of a just tell us about yourself, right? For the grant funding, it's a little bit more involved because it is, there are some documentation that we need. So for example, your W-9 form and things like that, because there's money involved. But we designed the application to not be that much of a burden, because we've heard all the stories about a lot of the hoops that small businesses have to jump through to receive grants from elsewhere and to receive loans and funding. We did not want it to be that, right? So the application is fairly simple. There's some documents you have to have, of course. So for those of you who are listening who want to apply, have your W-9 form, have some proof of your business, EIN or SSN. But other than that, again, it's still tell us your story. Tell us about your business. What are you serving? How are you benefiting the community? If you receive this grant, how will you put it to use? So it's less about, a lot of these tactical questions, but more where the business owner can just express themselves and kind of what their need is and what they hope to achieve with their business.
Now I know, and that's what I really liked about what Melissa said, because, sometimes we're out there fishing for money, for dollars. But, those dollars only last but so long. But once it's almost like the, teach a man to give a man a fish, you'll eat for a day, teach a man a fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And so the other services that the grants, they're grants of services. And I want to make sure people hear that and understand that. It's not only, I guess, financial grants, but also other kind of support. So make that distinction again. And why did you all decide to do that?
I'll start and let Melissa jump in. But again, it goes back to the whole, we wanted to really impact these businesses and set them up for future success. One of the goals of the Comcast Rise program, like I said, is to help these small businesses with equity. We talk about DE&I, right? But we always gloss over the E, equity, digital equity, financial equity, and to set them up with long-term success, not just for today, right? And so the reason why, the partnership with Eureka is so valuable, because as she said, we can give you the $10,000 in grants, but you wrap that grant into business diagnostic. Okay, what are some of the steps to help spend that grant? Where is your business at in its life cycle, and what type of coaching is best beneficial to you? And that's the value of this program to you. And you said it eloquently, right? It's a grant of funding, but also a grant of services. And that's what Eureka provides. You're setting up that business for long-term success because they're receiving coaching, not just on how to spend that money, but how to help their business grow and succeed for the long term.
Yeah, she nailed it as expected. But I just want to really give some props here to Comcast. And I'm sure Ms. Rolock more than anyone. But when all the grant programs started, the average grant was $5,000. And unfortunately, that was pegged to the average amount that Black businesses apply to the PPP program. But unfortunately, we all know people apply for what they think they can get, but not what they need. And so I do think it's significant that $10,000 can really move a business. And I think to Reagan's point, this is an opportunity for them to really not just starve off some of the challenges, but really think about how do they pivot and grow toward the future. And so the coaching is really designed to say, look, how do we get you caught up? How do we get you to a point of stability? And then the ongoing coaching support and the training really talks about how do we get you to a point of resilience? And so we talk about and have tools that say, how well is your website performing? How well is your social media performing? Because we really, unfortunately, even in DC, things are open now, but we don't really know we're going to close back. And so I think it's important that this is a program that is not just committed to how do you survive over the next couple of months, but how do you really adjust your business and your business model to what I would say is our new normal as we still adjust and have the ebbs and flows of states and cities opening and closing, but also how we adjust to the fact that customers have changed. We know there are more delivery trucks on the road right now than before. People are hesitant to go to malls. And how can these businesses really capture the fact that people are still spending money? They just have to readjust who their customers are and how and where they meet them.
That's fantastic. Well, two last questions, because I'm way over time, but I get so excited about our guests sometimes I just forget the time. while Chevy's over here saying stop. But anyway, and I always have my last question. So number one, is there minimal length of time that a business needs to have been operating in order to apply? And two, how do you apply? And what's the deadline? So that's 3 questions. I'm sorry.
Okay. So for the grant process, the application window is open now, and it closes on October 14th. So you got 6 more days. So get your applications in. All the details are on ComcastRise.com.
Okay.
And so to be eligible for the $10,000 grant, a business will have to have been in operations for at least 3 years, because our data has shown that is kind of the point where the $10,000 can be the most beneficial at kind of that 3-year mark. And so if you go to ComcastRise.com, you'll see all the information there, all the eligibility criteria, and you can go to the grant process. But the core process, and what I mean by core process, that means for the marketing awards or for the technology makeovers, that window is always open. It never closes. So if you want to also apply, because you can apply to both, right? If you want to also apply to receive either a technology makeover, getting complimentary internet, phone and security services, or marketing support, a free commercial, some free airtime, you can also apply on the same website, and that window is always open. But for the $10,000, that is very time constricted. So you have to get your application in by October 14th.
All right. Well, I thank both of you all for being with us today, for sharing this very valuable information in a lot of ways. And Melissa, I really thank you for providing or becoming a partner and providing, a resource that people don't ordinarily get. They know they need it, but they don't know how to get it. And so great partnership, great program. And I appreciate both of you all being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day. So last, but certainly not least, Reggie Williams, a behavioral health educator, is here to talk about his new book, A Marginalized Voice, Devalued, Dismissed, Disenfranchised, and Demonized. Reggie, thank you so much for being with us. I think you're muted. Can you, I need Michelle Dell's sign so we can get you, because we can't hear you.
It says I'm unmuted.
There you are. Now we can hear you.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's indeed an honor.
Yeah, it's been a while. But this book I think is really, really important. And that's why I want to take, some time to talk to you about it, even though we are over time, but that's okay. So, tell us about the book.
Well, the book was written, to be honest with you, when I began writing it, I didn't even know I was writing a book. I was really just getting some of the things that was in my heart and in my spirit, having worked with, boys and men for a period of about 14, 15 years. So I was just really just jotting stuff down. And then eventually I realized it was a book, but it was a book that was written to elevate the voices of African-American boys who too often feel the stain and shackles of being misunderstood, marginalized, and muted. And it was interesting in listening to the other interviews, Dr. Myers and Mr. Cobb. I think it was Dr. Myers who said that SNCC to Black Lives Matter was a part of a continuum. And really, in many ways, this book is also a part of a continuum. It's, when you think about SNCC, you're talking about they're fighting for political inclusion, so they were fighting for a voice. And this book is just about giving a voice to young Black boys.
I'm glad you've done this because, one, I'm, as a mother of 2 sons, I have one of our co-workers here who's helping with the show, mother of 3 sons. And, although the fathers are definitely involved, but, we do recognize, as mothers that we do things somewhat differently and are really concerned about our boys, especially in this age as they go from, maybe 12 or 13, up until 40. I'm just joking with that, but I'm really serious.
No, it's serious.
Yeah. So, what would this book help or tell us about, either as parents, as raising boys or grandparents, or teachers or anybody who has to interact with our sons and black boys?
Great question. The latter half of the book was driven by a word, medical term called iatrogenic. And basically iatrogenic is just basically saying when someone does unintended harm. And oftentimes, even as parents, as teachers, as therapists, as motivational speakers, we believe that we're helping our kids, and oftentimes we're not. And I had one particular mother who emailed me and said the book was a hard book to read. And I didn't really know what that meant. So I hit her back and said, what do you mean by that? She says, it is causing me to look in the mirror in a way that I had never looked at myself. And I began to understand some of the damage that I had done to my sons, even in trying to be very authentic in how I raised them. And so what the book talks about is these nuanced behaviors that people find themselves in, and they believe that it's helping, but oftentimes it's hurting. There's this thing I say, I wish I can remember it exactly, but I said, being a great, and I talk to fathers. So let me just say this right quick. I talk to fathers, I talk to mothers, I talk to educators, I talk to therapists, I talk to motivational speakers, and I really want to say their names because I talk to the church. I kind of hit the church. But I say this thing to mothers all the time. In the greatness of mothering, oftentimes young boys are hurt.
I mean, give us an example. What is it that we do wrong?
Well, I don't want to necessarily say do wrong, but I'm gonna use my youngest. I want to use my youngest daughter. I know we're talking about boys. I'm gonna use my youngest daughter.
Okay.
So my wife and I are watching her play soccer. And my wife, her name is Peachy Pleasance, and that's her real name, and she's really peachy and she's really pleasant and the whole 9 yards. And she's very calm and collect about everything. So we're watching our daughter play soccer, and she's on the far end of the field, and she gets knocked down and she's a little dazed. And there are people on that end of the field who are kind of jeering her and kind of almost laughing at the fact that she's hurt. And so my wife rises up and she's going down there and she's going to take care of it. I said, nah, kind of just sit down, sweetheart. And so, why I have to, I want to go down there and take care of my baby. No, baby, sit down. And I want to go down there and take care of it as well. But what I recognized and what I told her is that in life, she's going to get knocked down. In life, she's going to get jeered. And if you don't allow her to get up and do this now, she'll never be able to do it. And so sometimes, and you're nurturing as much as you want to protect them, sometimes you're hurting them. So in the chapter that I wrote to the mothers, I call it Sever the Cord. And my wife actually didn't like that title. But I said, you have to sever the umbilical cord, but what you're trying to do is create a wireless connection.
So what makes you, Reggie Williams, an authority on this subject? I mean, because people, how we are, we're like, well, who are you to tell me how to raise my kids? But it says you're a behavioral health educator. But what does that mean? What makes your authority on this subject?
I don't. The first thing is I don't consider myself an authority, right? Okay. I hate the fact that people come into rooms and feel like because of their titles or their education or their licenses that they've arrived and they become the authority. So I'm not an authority figure. But what I've done is over 20 years, I've listened to stories and I've listened to what they've said. So this book is not about me being smart and telling you how to do things. This book was about me taking the stories that I've heard over 15, 20 years, and I put it in the book. And these young boys are telling me the problems in having relationships with their mothers or having relationships with their fathers or the educational system. Quick story. I was on a radio program and this man called in and he was very emotional. And he says, I've been waiting 63 years to hear what you just said. And that thing hurt my heart because here it was, he hadn't been affirmed in 63 years and he had to, whatever it was I said, because I still don't know what I said, whatever it was I said, it affirmed him. But again, I'm not an authority. I just take the information that's given to me, I lay it out on the book, and what you do with it is what you do with it.
So about COVID, right? over the past year, and I don't know if the book brings us up to this point, but it seems like we can't have a conversation about anything without talking about this pandemic. And this pandemic has caused a lot of, particularly, I mean, just a lot of us to be isolated and disconnected from friends and what have you. We're hearing a lot now about how social media is impacting girls. And it's probably so much more now that they were isolated and utilized social media to connect. Let's talk about boys. Can you give us some perspective on, how, COVID may have impacted our boys and how social media impacts them as well?
Well, COVID is, as you know, it's been a wreck on all of us. And if you watch 60 Minutes in the Facebook debacle, or the person who came out, she talked about how Instagram was affecting young ladies and how they began to have greater self-doubt based off of Instagram. And for young boys, I don't think it's much different because, again, you're in that isolated state, in that they've been in that isolated state, for the past 18, 20 months or whatever it's been. But at the same time, young Black boys oftentimes feel like they're in an isolated state. They feel like no one sees them. And I always talk about the invisible backpack that young Black boys wear. They have to put up fronts of being macho or tough when really, beneath all of that, they just want to be heard. And so, COVID and placing them in this isolation only exacerbated what they were already dealing with, which is I'm not being seen.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. So how can we get copies of the book? Where can we find it?
You can go to amvonlinestore.com. So it's AMV, like a Marginalized Voice, onlinestore.com.
Okay. All right. And are you looking for feedback? Because you talked about a mother that read it and responded. Are you looking for feedback from people who read the book as well?
Absolutely. I've gotten some great feedback. I have feedback on the website, people, Facebook, emails. The greatest all the feedback I've gotten has been, I call it good. I really enjoy it. But the greatest feedback for me personally, Denise, was the book is in Ridgeland Correctional Federal Penitentiary in Ridgeland, South Carolina. And one day I got a package and I opened up the package, and there was just all these inmates who were writing me letters thanking me for the book. And I just broke down and cried because, they was telling me how the book was affecting their lives and how they saw where they kind of went the wrong way. So again, this is not me being an expert. It's like the Bible, man. You say God was the inspiration for Bible, but there was a man who wrote it. I didn't write this book. I'm just the author of the book. Those young boys and their stories wrote the book. So I'm always looking for feedback because it's the next story. And I want to be able to add that this is a fluid document, a moving document, and one of the books I'm looking to write right now, actually, I'm not looking to write it. It's called The Renaissance, The Raising of Black Boys. And I want mothers to write this story. So yes, I am looking for feedback.
Interesting. And, the age appropriateness of the book, is it written for adults, or can how young or how old should a person be in order to read this book?
There is some explicit language in there, and I explained in the introduction why it is, but anyone can read it. And a quick story, a 10-year-old picked up the book. His mother had the book. He picked up the book. He read something in the book, and he said, "Mommy, this is me."
Wow.
And what he meant by it is that these teachers, what he's saying in this book about these teachers is happening to me. And this was during COVID. And when they went back to school the next year, they had this thing called tell us about who you are. And him and his father created this slide. And in this slide, he told his teachers, "I will not be muted and you will begin to answer my questions." And he kind of got that from reading the book. And this was at 10 years old.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it sounds as if you know, this was in your head for a long time, you know, to try to put this in writing. Is this your first book?
I was part of an anthology, so I wrote one chapter of a book before, but this was actually my first book. And you know, just for full disclosure, Denise knows I used to work at the Afro, and all the times I was working at the Afro, people kept saying, "When are you going to write a book?" And I was like, "Never," because I'm a journalist doesn't mean that I'm going to write a book. And so when I finally found my way out of journalism into behavioral health, again, like I said, when I wrote the first 4 chapters, it was really me just pouring on the pages. And I took those 4 chapters, Denise, and I didn't touch it for 3 years. And one day God said, finish that book. And I was like, what book? He said, that book. And that book became A Marginalized Voice.
So I don't have a copy here, so I can't give the book equal time, but do you have one with you? Because we certainly would like to see it.
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. Interesting. Okay.
And I will send you one.
How'd you get across? How did you come up with the cover?
The cover, look,
because it's from what I can remember, I mean, it's a picture of a Black male, bruised face, American flag over his mouth. How did you decide that this was an image that you wanted to use for the cover?
Just make sure there's a scar here, and then there's a blood-stained tear.
Right.
It took a year. It took almost maybe 14 months for me to come up from the cover. I went through 3 or 4 different artists, and we just kept going over and over and over again. And actually, that particular cover, I had a different idea for, but the artist took the idea that I had, said, I think this might work better. But I know that I wanted him to have locks, because oftentimes, you know, the world sees young Black boys with locks as dangerous, right? So I knew I wanted to have that. I wanted his face to be bruised because, again, this is the story of a lot of young Black boys. Whether you see the bruises or not, they are there, you know, and the scars. And then the American flag, while it you know, some people may think it's just about being about America, it's just about having your voice, you know, marginalized. You can't speak because something's covering. So it took a long time for me to come up with that cover, but I think that's the cover that I think it says everything about what's in the book.
So, you know, I'm glad that we were able to extend the program longer, because I really did want to talk to you a lot about this, and I've finally gotten that signal. But before we go, I always said that, but before we go, can you tell us one thing that you think in writing this book, if a mother, a teacher, a father, you know, one thing they could do differently that might, I know every child is different, every family is different, so there's probably no, you know, broad brush stroke that we could all do, but maybe there's that one thing that you think could make a difference in raising our boys.
The one thing I think can be different, whether you're father, mother, teacher, whatever, is see that child. I am telling you, Denise, a lot of young boys feel like they're not seen. And so again, if when I walk into a room to work with young boys, the first thing I want to do is not teach them, have them teach me. And then when they teach me, then I know how to work with them to help them. And so we have to begin to understand who they are. We have to begin to see who they are. And we have to begin to honor the genius that's in them, even if we can't understand that genius at that particular time. Because these young Black boys are geniuses, but they because they feel invisible and not seen, you know, they just live a life where they feel marginalized. So the one thing I would tell anybody is just to see them and take some time to hear their voice, because once you are heard, you then become
because that's what I see, or that's what I hear you saying, is that we also need to hear them. And it goes back to what we heard earlier in our first interview, that we have to avoid generational wars, you know, because I'm older,
absolutely.
I'm better. And
absolutely.
So we don't know until we hear. So
absolutely.
Great advice. Thank you, Reggie. Congratulations on the book.
Thank
I
you.
hope folks will reach out and get a copy, if not for yourself, just to share with someone else that you know. It sounds like it's a community read, though. Everybody needs to read it. So wish you the best of luck, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
All righty. So this brings us to the end of another edition of Win TV. We went so much over this time. I apologize to those of you all who had something to do at 1 o'clock, and I want to thank you for sticking with us. We will be back here next week. We've got a great show that will be produced by Desiree Williams, who I've talked to you all about a lot, and we're calling this her midterm project. But at any rate, no, she's excited and has some great programming lined up for you. Chevy's going on vacation. She needs it. Give her a hand. She's going on vacation. And also want to thank Angel Johnson, who's also supporting us with our program today. I'm now going to turn it over to Bridge TV with sounds of the DMV and what's going on in DC with the media prints. And I will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Be safe and take care.
We're back, and I got 4 words. Thank God it's Friday! And just like any other Friday, we got all the trending news of the area, all the way from VA to Baltimore. Let's talk Jadakiss. Let's talk YouTube banning. Let's freaking talk Yo Gotti. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's Going On DC. I'm your boy, the Media Prince, and you know I'm all things DC, Maryland, and VA. So let's get started on a bizarre note. There have been sightings of zebras in Upper Marlboro. Yes, zebras. Take a look. According to Baller Alert and the Washingtonian, a new report has crowned DC, yes, DC, as the best city for dating. Now, I know some of y'all are looking like, I know you lying, but we want to hear from you. Tell us if you agree. Wale posts this tweet, and the I is tired, and all of us spoke up because this has happened to us all. So we all know today's price is not yesterday's price. Well, the man who helped anchor that, the Jadakiss, has a message for DMV's own Corday. Take a look.
You're incredible. I love you. Let Corday know he got to get one with Kiss for my bucket list. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Man, wouldn't that be a fire collab? Our favorite guy, IDK, trademarks his name, IDK. And look at what he will charge if he catches you saying IDK. Man, check out this message from him, and all artists listen up.
So lucky right now because I've been doing this so long that the industry doesn't have expectations for me anymore.
Right.
Like when you first start popping off, they're like, he's gonna be the next da-da-da. That's the worst one. I think I was gonna be the next Kanye. I was gonna be the next Kendrick Lamar.
Did you ever believe it even for a split second? Did it make you feel good?
I believed it. That the industry made me believe that. And then I started seeing, okay, that's how I used to think. I was like, Kendrick Lamar put out Section 80 at 23. By the time he was this age, he was that. So by the time I'm that age, I'm going to be this, da-da-da. And if I'm not that, then I failed. Like,
as we're collecting these keywords, empathy, expectation, vulnerability. Now we're talking about competition and comparison.
Oh, can I get into that? Please don't compare yourself to anybody. Every single person's story is different. There's no two stories that are the same.
Let's send big ups to B-More's own DJ Flow for continuously making strides in his area. Read this dope caption. Man, take a look at the photos. So all my content creators of the area, YouTube is banning and blocking all anti-vaccine content. So if you're wondering why your content is not up and mysteriously missing, you know what time it is. The city celebrated the opening of the community-inspired Chase Bank. It just opened up a new location in Ward 7. This new branch is part of JP Morgan's Chase continued efforts, which was $30 billion, to help push equity in communities across the United States. VA's own Missy Elliott celebrating yet another TikTok craze of her music. Take a look.
Give me all your numbers so I can phone you.
This week marked the 36th annual Mayor Arts Awards, and we were there to capture the entire night. Let's take a look at what's going on in DC outside. And shout out my epic boss. His camera skills are so damn dynamic. Hey, it's your boy, The Media Prince, and I want to welcome you to another edition of What's Going On DC Outside. Today, as you can see in the background, we are at the 36th annual Mayor Arts Awards here in DC, held at the Howard Theater. So tonight, we just gonna be catching a vibe and seeing all the great acts we have of the DC area that makes up so much greatness here. And I got the boss with me tonight, so we gonna move around. Come out with us.
I'm just like you, though we go through different versions of the same things.
Miles, mini shots up, and Matthew threatened it. Give it up for him, y'all. Come on. Let him hear it.
And for the 2021 Mayor's Arts Award for Youth Creativity Award goes to
Hi everyone. I would just like to thank God. I would like to thank my mom and dad because they've helped me conquer all of my achievements.
And the 2021 Larry Neal Writers Award goes to Jade Foster.
Jade Foster. I was born in Southeast Washington, D.C. Peace, family. How y'all doing tonight? Good. I do have to say before I get started, Southside is in the building tonight. Okay. Period.
The 2021 Mayor's Arts Award for Fashion and Beauty Industries goes to the museum.
What's up, DC? It is National Sons Day, so I'm glad I can be up here with my son.
And the 2021 Mayor's Arts Nightlife Award goes to Mitch Mathis.
Honored to receive this award tonight on behalf of DC Nation. That's our promotional group.
Brown, one of the winners tonight. How did it feel?
Awesome. It felt amazing. I've been activating in the scene for quite a while, creating, curating, activating, connecting with the community. It's felt awesome, awesome, awesome.
In 3 words, how would you describe tonight?
Accomplished, recognized, seen.
And then we have it. This weekend, Mayor Bowser and the District Department of Transportation welcomes back Open Streets DC. It will be located this year on Georgia Avenue Northwest between Berry Place and Missouri Avenue. So cars, you could pretty much count those streets out. The event will offer a wide range of fun and family activities. Get out there. Now last but certainly not least, let's talk Yo Gotti. The Memphis spitting rapper has become the co-owner of our soccer team here, DC United. Take a look.
Turn the music up, turn me down.
Let's go get him again. It's time for the money, my nigga.
Welcoming you to the Black and Red family. Welcome to Audi Field.
Well, that's it, folks. Until next week, we are headed out. For all this and more, take your butt to wibridgedc.com so that you don't ever miss out on the bridge greatness and what's happening in the area. Make sure you follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow those hashtags WGODC and WIBridgeTMP style. Now, we're signing off. Have a good weekend.